Leadership Explored is a podcast where we explore what it means to lead in today's world. Each episode dives into different aspects of leadership, from practical strategies to deep insights about human behavior, culture, and ethics. Whether it's navigating challenges in the workplace or discovering new ways to inspire and motivate, we're here to dig into all things leadership, no matter the industry. Join us for conversations that are insightful, real, and geared toward anyone looking to lead with purpose. Remote work versus office work. It's not just a preference anymore, it's shaping the future of work itself. Companies are making bold moves with return-to-office mandates, but are they missing the bigger picture? Today, we're tackling the debate head-on. When does RTO make sense? Where does it fall short? And how do we find a balance that works for everyone? Welcome to the first official episode or content episode of Leadership Explored. I'm Ed Schaefer.
And I'm Andy Siegmund.
And we are your hosts. Thanks so much for joining us. So, Andy, you wanted to bring this topic as our first podcast episode, so why don't you get us started?
So I've really kind of complicated thoughts on being in the office. I've spent a lot of time in the office. I've spent a lot of time as a remote worker and in a bunch of hybrid roles. I remember, my dad even was an office worker, and when he had the opportunity to work remotely, he gave it a hard no. So I think it's a really complicated topic, and I'm looking forward to diving into it. So I'm actually calling in from the office right now. So I am at my office here in Denver, Colorado, with some of my coworkers not far away. And part of the reason that I'm here is I think that it's a fast track to building relationships. It's really easy for us to approach the human side of the business when we have unplanned interactions. And in my experience in fully remote roles, especially when coming in a leadership position, not having the opportunity to have those unplanned interactions is way harder, right? It's super easy for me to go tap somebody on their shoulder and ask them a question or explain something to me, or just, hey, why don't we go out to lunch? Or do you want to get a coffee if you've got a little bit of time? And those unplanned interactions, I think, are really just critical to relationship building and establishing yourself within a firm, especially as a new member of a firm. I'm curious, what your thoughts are, Ed, on that bit of content.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all of that. I didn't work remote until the pandemic started. I occasionally got to work from home, but not as a consistent thing. And I remember actually when we were working together, since that was when the pandemic hit, there was a few people that I had never met in person. And I remember thinking that there was maybe some issues, or that they didn't like me that much or something. But then I finally got a chance to meet them in person, and the relationship was better than I expected. So there is definitely something about connecting in person that makes it easier to build a relationship. Maybe it's you're not just a face on a screen, you're an actual person. Or in some cases, I mean, I'm working with some clients now who almost never use video calls. So they're just a voice in the ether. And I think about the popping in for quick questions too. It is harder these days to, it's like everything has to be a meeting, it almost feels like. And if you don't have access to something like Slack with the huddles that you can jump in really quickly, then it does make it trickier to get time, or everybody's calendar's filled with meetings. So, I definitely see that. I know your opinion kind of changed on this a little bit though. So what really made your opinion change, would you say?
So I think it's just exposure. This is the first time really since we worked together that I've had the opportunity to go into the office and have it not be meaningfully inconvenient. And I'm sure that we'll talk about the convenience aspect and wanting to be in the office at some point throughout this conversation. But I want to touch on, you talked about like coffee chats or, like the Zoom huddles thing. The other thing with in-person, and this might just be my opinion, but when I ask you for a huddle after a call, it feels like a taller ask than leaving a conference room with somebody and just kind of striking up the conversation or continuing the conversation. There's this sort of organicism to being in person and those like human interactions that there are some hurdles to when we do it remotely. And I think you can work around it. In my previous role, I did a lot of huddles, a lot of Slack. I've been kind of a Slack power user now for years, but I still think that there's an upside to some of those human interactions. I really like what you pointed out about like just seeing the humanity of people a little bit differently. There's 3D body language is a little bit different than 2D body language, and our brain's ability to perceive it.
Yeah. I mean, some of the tools do make it a little easier, like the Slack huddle, as opposed to, I mean, I guess Teams, you can just call somebody up, but some of them feel a little more friction heavy. But regardless, there is that friction because as somebody who worked in an office for well over a decade and it was a big campus and stuff, the amount of times it was like, oh, the meeting room we're going to is, down 6 floors
Three
and
blocks
across,
away.
maybe not that far, but yeah, they'd be a little
Yeah.
far away. So like there was time walking over there, walking back. It was easy to just grab somebody when you saw them coming back from somewhere, things like that. And you really don't get those opportunities in the same way. Maybe like a
Yeah.
tool like Gather Town, which almost nobody's using, but there are some tools that are it's almost a representation of you as if you're in the office. That makes it
Hmm.
easy to be able to tell, oh, someone is there or they're away or their heads down working because they set their avatar to look like their heads down working. But that's not a super common tool that a lot of people are using.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can of course use like statuses and Slack and what have you, but those are not always reflected. And then there's of course the different things, and I think it depends on like your organizational culture, but places I've been that have Slack channels that are not work related could be really advantageous for some of the relationship building. It's like, oh, this is our random channel where people post pictures of their kids and their dogs and their cats and what have you. I think that could be really useful. And one of the other things I've kind of noticed, so just for context, right? I've been in 2 3 days a week, so I'm not in the office 5 days a week, and part of that is super strategic. I'm coming in when I've got bigger blocks of nothing on my calendar, or when I don't have critical work, like heads down work that I need to go in, because I'm literally going in to be distracted, right? Like that's the point. And I think one of the big pros that people talk about work from home is the fact that they're not distracted. But that kind of brings me to my next issue, right? Which is, if you're going to be in the office, I think it's got to be opt in. It can't really be mandatory. And that's twofold. One is, I only really want to be in the office with people who want to be here. So it's like a bit of just vibes, man. Um, and two, like, you've got to have you've got to be set up to go into the office, and it's really only valuable when there are other people in the office. So what I've been doing lately is we have an office Slack chat. So most of my company is located locally. There are a handful of folks I work with who are distributed, so everyone who's located locally is part of the office Slack. And in the evenings or late afternoons, we'll kind of post if we're going in tomorrow, and you'll see somebody will post, and then a bunch of other people like, oh, you're going to go in, I'll come in too. And it turns into this like virtuous cycle of folks who want to be there. And I think that that's also helpful. It's like, oh, Andy's going to be there. I know I've got some time that I got to spend with him tomorrow. Maybe I'll go in, because then we can do that in person. It'll probably just be easier, or at least maybe a little bit more fun. Is the way I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so when the office started opening back up after COVID, I went in. I was excited to go in, and I remember going in, and there was only a few people there, which was okay. But the problem ultimately was I'd go in and then sit at my desk just to be on video calls, and not only is that not fun exactly to be there by yourself on video calls, but also my setup here is way better than it ever could be in the office as far as headphones or video or all of that stuff.
A door
So
to close, right?
yeah. So it was, I remember being excited to go in and then going in a few times. And then it was like, I'm probably not going to go in again unless we as a team are all going in or we're trying to get together and meet. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think before the pandemic, it was very possible and not that unusual to be all relatively co-located. I mean,
Mhm.
living in when I lived in Denver Metro and worked on a campus that was kind of south, people would drive all the way from the north part of town or wherever, and um, they had built their lives already planned around the commute and everything like that.
Mhm.
But with the pandemic, so many people have relocated, or on top, even if we exclude the flexibility it gave people to move, a lot of companies were hiring with no location in mind. So like if I got hired, I actually the company I'm working for now, I did get hired as a virtual office as a full time remote worker, and if they decided to do an RTO policy, which probably wouldn't happen because it's consulting, but if they did, I don't know what I would do because I've never lived in the city where the main office is. I'm probably not going to be able to relocate to a city that has one of their big offices. So a lot of
Yeah, it'd
people
be
moved.
disruptive and expensive, right?
Yeah. So the only thing I can think is if you know if a company says that RTO is mandatory, but they were previously flexible and let people come in from anywhere, I think the only thing they can really do is offer some kind of relocation fees, and then still ensure that they're doing flexible hours and other incentives that actually make it worthwhile to consider doing that. Because if you moved halfway across the country to be closer to family, to have support to like take care of your kids or something like that, and now they want you to move across the country again. Not only is there cost associated with that, but just the a lot of things could be lost that you might otherwise have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like there's been a lot of whiplash for employees out there of, return to office and the timelines of it. And some of it's even communicated super nebulously. So I had a role once where they were doing RTO and I was in a consulting role and we had historically not been in office, never had an office attachment as many consulting roles didn't. And we didn't find out until 2 weeks before the return date that we were actually exempt. We thought we were exempt, but we didn't know. Right. So there's a communication aspect, there's a whiplash aspect of it. And I think if you're going to be in the office, you as an employee have to be set up with infrastructure to be in the office. I think that starts at the hiring decision, not as like we're making this hard pivot. If an organization is going to make a hard pivot and say, hey, we were distributed but now we're going to be, return to core, return to office, whatever, they need to make that a possibility. And that's, you're also probably going to have a lot of attrition with it, just realistically. If you're asking a lot of people to move across the country or move into a large metro, and that was not your original piece. And I think that's an eyes wide open thing, that organizations have to have. And I think it really stinks for employees that you can be hired under one set of circumstances, and then that can change drastically in like 2 days. I think it was it Dell that I think asked for their entire sales force on like a Thursday. They're like, you have to be in the office 5 days a week on Monday. That impacts childcare, commute. Do you even have a car? Right? There's all these different things, that folks who have gotten used to working remotely, are going to have to change if they're pulled back into the office, especially on a super tight timeline.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's anything wrong with it inherently, but I think your culture and the way you're set up as an organization needs to really support that in a way that's meaningful. Um, because yeah, if I had to start going into the office, but it was less effective than working from home or made it more difficult to interact with clients or whatever the case might be, then not only would it be a pain in terms of the daily struggle and all of that, but it would be not really worthwhile compared to having the flexibility.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And you know, kind of coming back to the upsides of it, though, I think if you are prepared to be in the office, I think it can be a great accelerator. So I spent the first few years of my career in office, and I wouldn't trade that. I think that onboarding remotely is really challenging, no matter how good of a remote distributed company that you are. I think it's just easier. to do in person. And I've got a couple of cousins, for example, who are pretty early career. And one of the pieces of guidance I give them right now is, look, if you're choosing between a couple of jobs and one's a fully remote job and one is an in-office job, go take the in-office job, because you're going to have like opportunities for mentorship, opportunities to rub shoulders with people, opportunities to ask questions and get involved and learn about not just the culture of the firm that you're joining, but how to work, right? If you're a college student and you've never had a 9 to 5 job, like you might have had, an internship for a summer or whatever, you don't know what work really is yet. And I think it's really helpful to go and be in the dojo with everyone, or as my boss is calling it right now, the Thunderdome. But I think that that's really, really helpful. And I think, it's kind of popular on the internet to treat remote work as a right. I think it's a privilege. I think it's something that to a certain extent needs to be earned, right? And that's your ability to drive results. I'm not saying that every firm should hire you to be on site, and then once you deliver, you can move to remote. But I think you need to know how to work. And I think it's easier to learn how to do your job or how to have a job by being on site with a lot of people who are doing that job than it is to like do it from your apartment or your mom's basement, especially if you're early career.
Yeah, I mostly agree. There's obviously companies that are remote first and have been for a long time. So I I don't think most of them are only hiring experienced people. So there must be
Oh
successful
no,
ways to do this. But
they're definitely not. Yeah, and this is an opinion too, right? This is not
yeah, well,
not.
no. So there's definitely successful ways to be remote first for those junior employees. But I think about this quite a bit too. I've had I've worked with interns before. I've worked with fresh out of college grads. I've done that in the office. Not as much since we've been fully remote, the but yeah, I mean, I do agree. The amount of it's like visibility, but not just visibility for the person, but also the visibility they get of other people and how they act and behave.
Yeah.
The relation, like we talked about relationships earlier. I can think of some, some older people who were mentors for me and still are in some ways who I might not have interacted with as much or had an opportunity to meet if we hadn't been in person. And yeah, the whole learning how to go to work. There's things that I think are just intuitive, or I know how to do them now as it relates to communication or questions, or whatever the case might be. And when you are new to the career, you don't have that experience. So I definitely
Mhm.
see the upsides and benefits of that. I'm trying to think of myself
Right.
coming out of college, and if my first job had been sit at home, make sure that you log on. Um, I don't know. That would have been rough because even now,
the
the times I've
the temptation of like Netflix and video games and whatever your vice might be, for me at least, I think would have been way too hard. Like my first couple of years of work,
I mean, there's that. Also,
just
just
had
the like, how many times have you ever started a new job and not been sure what to do, and you have
Mhm.
experience or you have some context for the job, but if you're coming out of school with no context for work, like that's going to be a hard day. And onboarding I've done since remote has been hard. It hasn't been as effective
Yeah,
as a past onboarding. So with no
yeah,
experience,
that and one of the other things I've also thought, and maybe this transfers to later career, but I think it's more important early career is I've you and I have had this conversation probably a million times, that where I've said that I think there's a substantial amount of luck associated with career growth, right? There's timing, there's being good at what you do, but there's also just like there's just luck. Like it's just there's maybe there's a better word for it. But I think that if you put yourself around people and literally put yourself in the room with people making decisions, which is way easier to do on site, right? To be around and be seen, you just have a better opportunity to create some of your own luck, right? Like you're going to be able to have that conversation with a VP at lunch or at the coffee, bar or whatever, walking around the office, and that's not going to get you immediately promoted, but it's going to put you on that person's radar, right? It's going to make, people think about what they see. And I think especially when you're earlier in career, some of it's like it's literally just being around and being available. And I think that that kind of helps you create some of those opportunities that are not impossible remote. Like as you said, they're fully remote first cultures, and I'm sure have great growth plans and great onboarding plans, and I'm sure hire junior folks and do an excellent job. I just think that the pathway is probably a little bit easier if you're in the room, if you're in the building.
Hmm. Yeah, I think anyone who's going to do the flexible work option needs to needs to just do it deliberately, right? Both at the
Yeah,
company level and the leaders and the managers, but even at the individual level. Like it's a lot easier for me to go day by day when I'm remote if I'm intentional about it, and when I'm
yeah,
unintentional, uh, all of a sudden some of the wheels start to fly off because I don't have if I'm not intentional about it, I don't have those cadences and things like that to kind of keep me on track or keep me moving.
yeah. And that I actually is a great segue into the next thing I wanted to bring up, which is, yeah, everyone likes to talk about the downside of the commute. Oh, it's all this time out of your day, this, that, and the other thing, right? That's another kind of big thing on the internet of like, oh, if I spend an hour round trip driving, that's an hour less with my family or an hour less working or whatever. Those are valid arguments. But the counterpoint I would say is it provides this decompression period, right? It's sort of the commute into work can kind of be like the team in the locker room before the game starts. You're getting hyped, you're kind of getting ready to go do the thing. And then the commute home is like, it's the transition back to family mode, right? Back to whatever it is that you do in your spare time. And I think that that can be a huge asset. Like when I've had fully remote roles, you have to fabricate those boundaries, right? And if you're lucky enough to have, say, a dedicated office, it's a little bit easier. Where you're like, oh well, I do work in this room, and then when I'm outside of this room, I I'm now non-work Andy. But the transition, at least for me in my home office, from home office to where the rest of my family resides, takes about 6 seconds, right? And that's not a lot of time for your brain to switch gears. Whereas like a reasonable commute, and I think everyone's got a different view of reasonable. For me, it's sub 30 minutes seems to be tenable. You get to listen to a podcast, you get to listen to some music, have a little bit of me time before you go and pick up your kids or go home and see your wife, or you can kind of, if you had a bad day, you can yell at the other drivers on the road and get all your anger out before you have to go and see your loved ones. And I think that like there's an advantage to that, both from like a boundaries point of view as well as just a, hey, like I'm preparing to go to work, let's switch into work mode, and now I'm preparing to go home, let's switch into home mode.
Yeah, I mean
Curious on your thoughts.
that's the
Maybe don't yell at other drivers on the road. That's road rage is a big problem.
I mean the only thing I miss about having a commute is it did give me a lot of extra time to listen to an audiobook or a podcast. So I think I probably get through fewer books now than I used to. Um, it it's kind of funny to think about because uh, we were just talking about the intentionality of it, and I've seen that advice of the if you work from home, like make up a commute. Maybe that commute's like walking around the
Yeah, take a
block.
walk around your block.
Yeah,
Or
or
yeah,
maybe it's even like, oh, you get you have a pass to get a coffee every day from somewhere, so you drive a couple blocks away and get a coffee and come back. And I don't know. I've never really been effectively able to do that. If I definitely have this. If I wake up, I feel like I'm gonna be ready to get started working pretty soon after that. Even having other kind of routines is sometimes kind of a challenge for me
do,
with the morning routine.
do you have any like boundaries for, so one of the ones I always had for starting my workday was that I had to put on real pants. Like I could not sit down at my desk wearing the clothes that I slept in. And I'm curious if you've got any, like, even if it's like a little boundary like that. I don't have an end of day boundary where I then change back into sleeping clothes, but like I must wear real pants.
No, I don't really have any strong boundaries like that with it, which some days I don't mind, but some days I definitely wish that I did, because there are some days when it's just way too easy to get out of bed and eat. I get up pretty early, so it's not like I'm waking up late and then getting on the computer. But it's some days it's really easy to just get up and like, okay, let's just go straight onto the computer and get to work, whether it's personal projects or something for the workday. Um,
Yeah.
so but yeah, I guess that for me is the only thing I miss about the commute. I could try to be more intentional about it. Back when I worked in an office, I would go for walks multiple times a day. I don't do that as often as I did back then. Those would probably also give me some of those little pauses and breaks. But
Well,
I guess for me,
that's a funny
yeah,
that's a sorry, I want to unpack that a little bit because that's a funny thing that I've noticed too is like when I've been in the office, like every office job I've had, I've never ever had like any anxiety about going out for lunch or going for a walk in the middle of the day if I had the gap in my calendar. Whereas working from home, I've always been like, oh, I need to be chained to my desktop 100% of the working hours because God forbid I get a Slack message or whatever while I'm out walking my dog or while like I went upstairs in my house to like eat a slice of pizza. And I'm curious like if you felt that same awkward pressure that's like different when you're like people's oh yeah, I saw Andy in the office today. Clearly he's at work even if he's not literally here right now.
yeah. I mean, I guess I haven't thought about it so directly, but yeah, I guess I do have some of that. Even though I could take my phone with me and headphones, I could easily grab a call while I'm out or something, and I'm only going to be walking for what, 10 minutes or something, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, there definitely is something, but sometimes I wonder if it's like, well, when I went into the office, I didn't like being in the office all day, and I didn't necessarily like being around people 100% of the time all day long. So it was kind of nice to like, all right, I'm going to pop out, put on some headphones, like have a little solo time, decompress or whatever, and then get
Mhm.
back to work. Where I don't know if I don't know if this is a bad thing or a good thing necessarily, but I don't know if I need it, if I feel like I need it as much. Um, this is probably a bad thing. I'm quite happy to sit at my desk almost all day long, and work on stuff,
Yeah.
or you know, be doing whatever. So um, I
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic, right? Because like what I also find to be funny about this, like the way that I'm thinking about it directly, is like as as an employee, I think frequently about like if I'm working from home and I don't respond to that Slack message instantly, like I'm going to appear low trust or low effort or like low responsibility because I'm slacking off and like they're going to think that I'm watching Netflix and taking a nap or insert nefarious neglectful thing. But in the office, like the vibe sort of changes where it's like, oh yeah, they already saw me. Like if I duck out for 20 minutes, like everyone knows that I'm here. It's fine. But then if I put on my manager hat, I never have that same vibe, right? Where I'm like, oh, if Ed doesn't respond to this Slack message in 30 seconds, he's slacking off. I'm just like, oh, he must be busy. He'll get to it when he gets to it. So I think there's this kind of interesting dichotomy, and maybe that's just like my own pathology. But I do think that it like some of it sort of changes day to day, and like I think that like the stress, like there's a different stress of, in my opinion, of working from home that maybe isn't quite as acute in the office, just from a like proof that you're working point of view.
yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, and I know originally when we thought about this RTO conversation, we kind of pivoted it, but originally we were really going to focus on the leadership aspect of it, and like why are so many leaders seeming to push for RTO, and kind of what's going on underneath of that. And I think I don't I, it feels like it's like a control issues maybe that would be
Yeah,
that's my first guess, is like you feel like you need
or maybe just a silent layoff, like to be as blunt as possible. But yeah, I think there's some of that, and I think that also, like, maybe it's trust, maybe it's control, but I think at the end of the day, like, as leaders, if we're if you are a leader at a company and you want there to be an office culture, you have to drive that office culture. And that's not mandate, in my opinion. I think that's a matter of making it an asset for the folks who work with you. And that involves like getting a critical mass, getting folks there on the same days. So if you're going to do a hybrid, like, not saying, Ed, you need to be in the office 3 days a week. Ed, the office days are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever those days happen to be. And then as a leader, you need to actually be there and ideally be working with people who are there, right? Because if I'm asking Ed to come into the office every day, yeah, I'm asking you to come into the office in Denver every day, and you're spending your whole day talking to people in Tulsa, um, just picking, random cities here. Um, it's not really valuable for you to be there, right? And if I'm a leader and I'm coming into the office to then spend my whole day on video calls, then what's the value of the people that I'm asking to come into the office? I should be working with the people who are there, right? Or I should be trying to generate that aspect. And I think that like that goes down through like hiring decisions, co-locating teams and groups and organizations. It impacts like the whole architecture of your group, if that's a thing that you value. And it's probably easier to do in a smaller firm than a bigger firm. I think the more people you get involved, the more complicated that starts to become.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I think leadership has to model a lot of this. And it's, it's, it's both them modeling the behaviors they want to see, but then to your point, also making the environment worth it to go in and actually conducive um, to learning and being effective. I've worked in a lot of offices where some office manager designed it and it was not actually conducive to working together. I think with the RTO policies that people are most upset about, like with Amazon or Starbucks, I think fundamentally it's
Mhm.
because the leader is not they're saying you have to do this, but then they're getting a private jet to be able to fly across country every day, or whatever the situation is. Like
Right,
it's
right. Or the office is in a super high cost of living downtown, and yeah, the CEO can live next door, but your average office employee lives a 90-minute commute outside, right? Um, yeah, there's those power imbalances I think are important to
yeah.
acknowledge.
When even and I get it does have to be intentional and it has to be effective, because even when I worked in an office with a lot of people who were local to me in my time zone, we also worked with a lot of people internationally, folks in India and things like that. And so uh, it almost created two classes of worker, basically, because there's
Mm.
a bunch of people who are sitting together in a room and they're able to have quick conversations and make discussions or whatever, and then there was some number of people sitting on a phone who trying to interject or something is just not it. They can't raise their hand, they can't get somebody's attention. um, so
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's part of why I like my current setup, which is voluntary hybrid. Like, there's no in office requirement, so anyone who's coming in is 100% opting in. So inevitably, like, there are leaders on the call who are in the office, there are leaders on the call who are remote, there are ICs on the call who are in office, there are ICs on the call who are remote. So like, it by default levels the playing field a bit in that context. But yeah, I've definitely I've seen that before, and I think it's like, it's one of those things that's it's super nuanced, and it changes for everyone. Like, I don't come in if I've got a lot of head down thinking work to do, because I need to be not distracted. I also don't come in if I have 8 hours of meetings booked, because frankly, it's just easier to get a snack in between meetings in my house than it is to like go downstairs, go to the coffee shop across the street, or what have you. So I think that there needs to be, in my ideal world, there's a lot of flexibility, and the office should be upside, not government mandated fun.
Yeah. Well, I saw some research recently that was saying, and granted, it was a relatively small study and hasn't been replicated multiple times yet, but that they found that 25 to 40% of in-person time is kind of the ideal sweet spot, depending on the context. So, in the research, they were saying that for them, that looked like 2 days each week in the office. It doesn't have to be each week, though.
Mhm.
It might be maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's annually. I'm not sure how you'd get 25% time if you only meant
Just
20.
one quarter, we're all going to get
Yeah.
we're going to get all of our Hilton points.
But I think
Yeah,
about this too, and our opinions on this have changed over time as well. And I think certain when we worked with close teams who need to be together, it makes sense for them to meet more often. In certain
Mhm.
situations, though, like I'm working with a lot of consultants right now, my immediate team, none of us actually works on the same thing together. So while there might be some
Yeah,
niceties in relationship building or some connections and things like that, I don't know if getting us together 2 days a week in office or every month or every couple of months, I don't know if there'd be a lot of value in that or not. Maybe from an alignment perspective or from a vision or that sort of thing, but from an actual execution of the work, um, I don't know if that really would make as much sense in that context.
yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is it's complicated.
I mean, I guess like
Yeah,
everything, right?
it's
It depends, and there's no one
yeah.
size, there's no silver bullet, no one size fits all solution.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you're right. There's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all. Anecdotally, I think that 25 to 40% is probably about right. Just from my personal experience, I don't have the data to back it up. I think that's probably been the range of on-site I've had. Like if I look at my career overall, but it's been like in high pressure, low pressure, like a lot of on site, no on site. It's yeah varied over time. But yeah, I think it's complicated. I think I think that these are things that as leaders we should be thinking about. And I think if you're trying to grow your career too, the on-site component should be something that you should be thoughtful about. And I wouldn't necessarily advocate for folks saying, "Oh, I only want a remote job," because I think there's distinct upsides to being on site. And like, yeah, there's some pain associated with it, but I think that there's a lot to be gained from it. And I would not advise folks to write off roles that are on site just because you want to be remote or have previously been remote.
Yeah, I think for leaders out there, something I feel like I've seen is it seems like there's this well, we've tried nothing and we're entirely out of ideas. It's like the only two options are fully remote where we never ever meet or connect in person, or this RTO mandate where we're going to force everybody back. And it feels like there was no creative problem solving or attempts at anything in between. Um, there's hybrid models that work, maybe in-person team building, maybe retreats.
Hmm.
There's like a lot of options out there that people could explore, and I know sometimes there's like this we can't spend any money. There's no budget to spend on anything, but I think you and I have over the years we've just come to the conclusion like you have to meet in person, and whether that means we're all in the same city and we get to meet whenever we want to, or whether that means we have to intentionally design it and make sure we get together and make that time valuable. Um, Maybe have facilitators and make sure the space we actually accomplish what we're going for. That's
Yeah.
I think those are the things that we have to think about and try to make this more effective for people. Especially we didn't get into this today, and this might be a future topic, but um, a lot of companies are now reliant on people from all over the place. So what
Yeah.
does it do to you if you say we're only going to hire people who are co-located in this one city after the floodgates have already opened up? So maybe that's a topic for the future that we can explore.
Yeah, I think we definitely should, but I think this is a good way to wrap about things and maybe a good place for us to wrap up with. It's complicated. There's no silver bullet. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to intent, right? And making sure that when you're in person, there's a reason for it and it's deliberate. And nobody likes government mandated fun. People are always always gonna push back on a mandate. That I think is just the nature of large groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone who listened in. We really appreciate you making us part of your day. If you have any experiences or perspectives that you want to share, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to comment out there or reach out to us and let us know what you think. Thanks for exploring leadership with us today. If you found value in this discussion, please subscribe and share with other leaders in your network. We release new episodes every other week on Tuesday. Join us next time when we'll be discussing ethics and leadership. Until then, keep leading with purpose.